History holds secrets that refuse to stay buried. Ancient curses echo through time, tales of power so immense they toppled kings and doomed explorers. We are about to unravel 25 of these legendary mysteries, from the golden tomb of a boy pharaoh to a glittering diamond with a heart of darkness. You will discover the true stories behind the legends, separating historical fact from terrifying fiction. What really happened to those who opened King Tutankhamun's tomb? Can a simple gemstone truly carry a centuries-long trail of misfortune? By the end, you will possess a deeper understanding of how these curses were born and why they continue to haunt us. Do you believe a story can hold power over life and death? Deep within the sun-scorched Valley of the Kings, a silence had reigned for over 3,000 years. It was broken on November 4, 1922, by the pick of a water boy. His simple strike against a stone step would unveil the greatest archaeological discovery of the century, the intact tomb of the boy king Tutankhamun. The man who financed this quest, Lord Carnarvon, and the archaeologist who led it, Howard Carter, stood before a sealed doorway. When Carter first peeked a candle into the darkness, Carnarvon asked him if he could see anything. Carter's legendary reply was yes, wonderful things. Gold glittered in the flickering light, treasures piled upon treasures from a lost world, but the wonder was shadowed by a whispered threat. Legends spoke of a curse inscribed within the tomb, a warning of death coming on swift wings for those who disturbed the pharaoh's eternal peace. While no such dramatic text was found in clear sight, a clay brick discovered in an annex did bear a chilling spell. It promised to bind the enemies of the pharaoh, to strangle them like birds, and to see them fall into the water as their bodies were consumed. The global press seized upon this, and soon the curse had a name and a list of victims. The first was Lord Carnarvon himself. Just a few months after the tomb's official opening, he died in Cairo from a seemingly minor mosquito bite that became fatally infected after he nicked the bite while shaving. Reports swirled that at the exact moment of his death, all the lights in Cairo mysteriously failed, and back in England, his beloved dog howled and dropped dead. The curse seemed hungry for more. American financier George J. Goode, who had visited the tomb, died of pneumonia shortly after. Carnarvon's own brother, Aubrey Herbert, who was also present at the opening, died from sepsis following a dental procedure. The world watched, enthralled and terrified, as the death toll appeared to grow. Yet the man at the very center of it all, Howard Carter, lived for another 16 years, a fact often overlooked by believers. So what really happened? Skeptics point to far more earthly explanations. Ancient, sealed tombs can breed toxic molds and bacteria within their organic materials. Inhaling these spores after millennia of confinement could certainly cause severe illness, a phenomenon now known as tomb lung. Or perhaps it was simply a tragic yet profound coincidence. The power of suggestion is immense. When you believe you are cursed, the mind can make the body tragically susceptible. The so-called curse of the pharaohs was less a supernatural vengeance and more a perfect storm of circumstance, media frenzy, and human fear. It was the story that gave birth to the modern legend of the ancient curse. From the desert sands of Egypt, our journey now takes us to the deep blue fire of a legendary gem. The Hope Diamond carries a story of beauty and terror in equal measure. Its recorded history begins in the 17th century with a French merchant named Jean-Baptiste Tavernier. It is said he stole the massive blue stone from the eye of a statue of the Hindu goddess Sita. The legend claims the curse struck its first victim immediately. Tavernier, after selling the gem and amassing great wealth, was supposedly torn apart by a pack of wild dogs on a trip to Russia. This gruesome tale, however, is likely more fiction than fact, as historical records suggest he died of old age in his native France. Yet the seed of a curse was planted. The diamond was cut and recut, eventually finding its way into the treasury of King Louis XVI of France. He gifted it to his queen, Marie Antoinette. Both would later meet their ends at the guillotine during the French Revolution, their executions adding a bloody chapter to the gem's growing legend. The stone then vanished for decades before resurfacing in a new, smaller form, its deep blue color unmistakable. It was acquired by a wealthy British banking family, the Hopes, who gave the diamond its now famous name, though their own fortune eventually dwindled. The curse seemed to follow a relentless path across the Atlantic. American heiress Evelyn Walsh McLean bought the diamond, wearing it as a lavish good luck charm. Her life, however, was marked by profound tragedy. Her young son died in a car accident, her daughter took her own life, and her husband was declared insane, leading to the collapse of their family fortune and her newspaper empire. Even those who briefly touched the gem were not spared. A postal carrier named James Todd, who delivered the diamond to the Smithsonian Institution, was later seriously injured when his truck was hit by a car, and his wife and dog died soon after. So is this a 250-year-long supernatural punishment? Science offers a different kind of illumination. The Hope diamond possesses a rare quality. It contains traces of the element boron, which causes it to glow a brilliant, fiery red under ultraviolet light. In a dim, candlelit room centuries ago, such an unexpected glow from a deep blue stone could easily have been interpreted as an evil inner fire, a malevolent aura confirming its dangerous nature. This tangible, scientific property may have fueled the very superstitions that created its curse. Perhaps the true power of the Hope Diamond's curse lies not in magic, but in its terrifying reputation. Once you believe you possess an object of doom, every subsequent misfortune is filtered through that lens. A simple accident becomes a targeted strike from fate. The curse becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where fear itself is the real carrier of misfortune. This glittering gem makes us wonder if we are the ones who give stories their power over our lives. A different kind of curse was born not in a tomb or on a gem, but on an American battlefield in 1813. The Shawnee leader Tecumseh fought to unite native tribes against the encroaching United States, forming a powerful confederacy. His dream was shattered at the Battle of the Thames, where he was killed. The legend says that his brother, a spiritual leader known as the prophet Tenskwatawa, called upon the spirits for vengeance. He placed a curse upon the American president responsible for Tecumseh's death, William Henry Harrison, and upon every future president elected in a year ending with 0. Harrison, a famed military general, was elected in 1840. His inauguration day was bitterly cold, yet he delivered the longest inaugural address in American history without a coat. He fell ill with pneumonia and died just 1 month into his term, becoming the first victim of what would be called the Tecumseh Curse, or the 0-year curse. The pattern that followed was chilling and seemingly inescapable. Abraham Lincoln, elected in 1860, was assassinated in his second term. James Garfield, elected in 1880, was shot by a disgruntled office seeker and died months later from infection. William McKinley, re-elected in 1900, was assassinated by an anarchist. Warren G. Harding, elected in 1920, died suddenly of a heart attack in office. Franklin D. Roosevelt, re-elected for his third term in 1940, died of a cerebral hemorrhage, and John F. Kennedy, elected in 1960, was assassinated in Dallas. For over a century, every single president elected in a 0-year died in office, a pattern so stark it felt like more than mere chance. Yet all curses, no matter how powerful they seem, can be broken. The pattern held for 140 years until Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980. Just months into his presidency, he was shot by John Hinckley Jr. outside a Washington hotel. The bullet lodged inches from his heart, but Reagan survived after emergency surgery. His famous humor in the face of death, telling his wife he forgot to duck, seemed to defy the curse itself. Then in 2000, George W. Bush was elected. He too faced a brush with death when a pretzel momentarily choked him, but he survived his 2 terms unharmed. So what was this 0-year curse? Historians see it as a profound and tragic coincidence, a statistical anomaly amplified by the power of folklore. The presidency is a high-stress, high-profile position, and in an era with less advanced medicine and security, the risks were inherently greater. The curse provided a narrative, a story to make sense of random, tragic events. It connected a painful chapter of American history to the highest office in the land, creating a legend that reminds us how easily we see patterns in the chaos of life, and how a story of vengeance can outlive the history that created it. Ronald Reagan's survival was more than a personal triumph, it was a national turning point. When he walked out of the hospital, he fundamentally altered a legend that had held the country in its grip for over a century. His brush with death was severe, the bullet nearly finding its mark, yet his recovery was so complete and his spirit so undimmed that it seemed to drain the power from the curse itself. The public and the media, which had long been fixated on the 0-year pattern, now had a new narrative, one of resilience and a broken chain. This psychological shift was immense. For decades, the curse had been a dark cloud over every inauguration in a 0-year, a whispered anxiety that influenced how the public perceived a president's safety and even their own mortality. Political opponents sometimes used it as a subtle, superstitious weapon, and security details were undoubtedly more vigilant, their fears shaped by the curse's long shadow. The pattern was so deeply embedded in the national consciousness that it felt like an unavoidable law of American history, but is a pattern proof of a curse. Statisticians would urge caution. They point out that with a relatively small sample size of presidents over a long period, and with the inherent dangers of a high-profile leadership role in eras with primitive medicine and lax security, a cluster of tragedies is not statistically impossible. It is a phenomenon known as apophenia, the human tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. We are pattern-seeking creatures, and our brains are wired to find stories in chaos, to create cause and effect where none may exist. Historians largely agree, viewing the Tecumseh Curse as a powerful piece of folklore, a post hoc narrative. That means the story was constructed after the fact, a way to link the tragic death of William Henry Harrison back to the equally tragic death of Tecumseh, weaving a tale of vengeance that gave a sense of order and poetic justice to a series of random, senseless events. It was a story that helped a nation make sense of its own violent history. The curse was never written in any book or cast in any ritual. It was written in the collective fear of a people, a reminder that the stories we tell about the past can sometimes feel more real than the history itself. A different kind of political curse lies deep within the Wall Cathedral in Krakow. This story connects a royal tomb to the very heart of the Soviet Empire. In the early 1920s, shortly after the Russian Civil War, a team of Soviet officials arrived in the newly independent Poland. Their leader was the architect Alexei Tecumseh, and their stated mission was shockingly specific. They demanded to open the tomb of the last Jagiellon king, Sigismund II Augustus, to verify his remains and, according to persistent legend, to confiscate the priceless crown of his wife, Queen Barbara Radziwiłł. The official Soviet report claimed the exhumation was a simple act of historical verification, but to the Polish people it was a profound desecration, an act of power by a hostile state. It was from this violation that the curse was said to be born. Folklore insists that a warning was found within the tomb, a prophecy declaring that the power which desecrated this royal rest would itself fall from within. For decades, this seemed like nothing more than a bitter story, a whispered hope for justice. The Soviet Union appeared monolithic and unshakable, its power stretching across half the world. Yet, nearly 70 years later, that empire did indeed crumble from internal pressures, dissolving in 1991. To believers, the collapse of the Kremlin's authority was not a result of economic and political forces, but the delayed, inexorable fulfillment of a royal curse. So what is the truth behind this ominous legend? Historical records confirm that Tecumseh and his team did examine the tomb. They did take detailed notes and made sketches. The fate of Queen Barbara's crown, however, is far less clear. Many historians argue it was never there to begin with, having been lost or melted down centuries earlier. The dramatic inscription of a curse has never been found in any official document. It is far more likely that the curse was a story created by the Polish people themselves, a narrative weapon against an overwhelming oppressor. When you cannot fight a superpower with armies, you fight it with stories. A curse provides a framework for hope, a moral order where the aggressor will inevitably face cosmic justice. These tales flourish during times of intense political tension, offering a form of symbolic resistance. They allow a subjugated people to believe that history has a moral compass, and that even the mightiest empire is not immune to the consequences of its actions. The curse of King Sigismund was not a supernatural spell, but a powerful piece of political folklore, a story that gave a nation a sense of poetic justice long before history delivered its verdict. Far from the political curses of Europe, an emperor in ancient China sought immortality not through legend, but through sheer, terrifying force. His final resting place remains one of history's most tantalizing and forbidden secrets. In 1974, farmers digging a well outside the city of Zion stumbled upon a shattered clay head. This accidental discovery unveiled the first of thousands of life-sized terracotta soldiers, an entire army buried in battle formation. Yet this staggering find was merely the outer guard, a protective force for the true prize lying deep underground, the sealed tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. He was the ruthless unifier of China, a man obsessed with conquering death itself. The historical records of the grand historian Sima Qian, written a century after the emperor's death, describe a subterranean world of breathtaking scale. The tomb was said to contain miniature palaces and towers, priceless treasures, and a map of his empire rendered in dazzling jewels. Most chillingly, Sima Qian wrote of rivers and lakes of shimmering, liquid mercury, representing the great rivers of China flowing through this underground kingdom. To protect this eternal paradise, the accounts describe ingenious and deadly traps. Crossbows were supposedly set with trip mechanisms, ready to automatically fire a volley of bolts at any intruder who breached the sealed passages. For decades, these descriptions were treated as myth, the fanciful exaggerations of an ancient historian. Then modern science intervened. Geophysical surveys of the massive burial mound have repeatedly detected unusually high concentrations of mercury in the soil, readings so significant they perfectly mirror the described layout of the mercury rivers. The ancient tales were not just stories, they were based in a terrifying reality. This scientific validation gives birth to the tomb's enduring curse. It is not a spoken spell, but a silent, tangible threat. The fear of those ancient traps is matched by a very modern dread, the lethal toxicity of mercury vapor. To break into that tomb would be to unleash a poison that has been stewing for over 2,000 years. This potent combination of unknown mechanics and confirmed poison has instilled a deep reverence and caution in archaeologists. The central tomb remains unexcavated, not out of a lack of curiosity, but out of a profound respect for its dangers and a commitment to preserving its contents for a time when technology can safely defeat the emperor's ancient defenses. Stories of misfortune have, of course, swirled around the site. Early excavators of the terracotta army pits reportedly suffered from unexplained illnesses, and some of the farmers who made the initial discovery faced personal hardships, all of which are woven into the narrative of a protective curse. But the real power here is not supernatural. It is the enduring power of one man's paranoia. Qin Shi Huang's obsession with his own immortality created a monument that continues to defy us, a sealed fortress that protects his secrets as effectively today as it did 2 millennia ago. His curse is the silence he commanded from the grave, a challenge that modern science is still not quite ready to answer. The silent, toxic defenses of an emperor's tomb stand in stark contrast to a curse that works in plain sight, transforming the ordinary into stone. In the wooded landscape of Knaresborough, England, a waterfall cascades over a rocky outcrop, but it does not simply erode the stone beneath it, it creates it. This is the Petrifying Well, a place where objects left in its steady drip are not worn away but are slowly encased in a solid, stone-like shell. Hanging items from the water's flow was a common practice for centuries, resulting in a grotesque and fascinating collection of petrified teddy bears, hats, and even kettles, all turned to a seeming statue by the water's touch. The well's mysterious power was long attributed to a local legend, a woman known as Mother Shipton. Born as Ursula Southdale in a cave right beside the well in 1488, her birth was shrouded in rumor and fear. Her physical appearance was said to be twisted and hunched, and she was ostracized by her community, who eventually came to believe she was a witch with the gift of prophecy. It was she who was said to have cursed the well, imbuing the waters with their strange, stone-giving power as an act of vengeance or perhaps as a permanent display of her otherworldly abilities. Mother Shipton's prophecies were recorded long after her death, and they were eerily specific. She was said to have predicted the Great Fire of London, the defeat of the Spanish Armada, and even the advent of the automobile. Her most famous and chilling prediction foretold the end of the world in 1881, a date that passed without incident but which cemented her reputation for generations. The well, therefore, was not just a geological oddity, it was physical proof of her power, a cursed place that made her prophecies feel terrifyingly real. So what is truly happening at this magical-seeming well? The curse is not supernatural but scientific. The water flows through a thick layer of limestone, becoming saturated with dissolved minerals, primarily calcite. When this mineral-rich water drips over an object and is exposed to the air, the carbon dioxide in the air is released. This causes the calcite to solidify, slowly coating the object in a hard, stone-like layer. It is the same process that creates the stalactites and stalagmites found in caves, a perfectly natural form of mineralization. For a medieval mind with no concept of dissolved minerals, the effect was nothing short of miraculous and deeply frightening. A soft piece of cloth left for months and turning to stone could only be the work of magic or a curse. The legend of Mother Shipton provided the perfect explanation, a story that gave a fearsome, intelligent cause to a bewildering natural event. This is the alchemy of folklore, where nature's mystery is transformed into narrative. The curse gave the well its power to captivate, turning a simple chemical process into a source of endless wonder and a tourist attraction that thrives centuries later. It reminds us that sometimes the most compelling curses are not spells cast upon a place, but the stories we cast upon the unknown. That deep blue fire of the Hope Diamond holds a secret written not in legend, but in its very atomic structure. This is not just any gem, it is a Type 2b diamond, one of the rarest on Earth. Its mesmerizing color comes from tiny traces of the element boron, atoms that slipped into the crystal's carbon lattice under immense pressure deep within the planet. But boron does more than just paint the stone blue. It gives the diamond a ghostly second life under ultraviolet light. When the lights go out, the Hope Diamond does not go dark. It burns with a brilliant, intense red phosphorescence that can last for several minutes. Now picture this in the 17th or 18th century. A wealthy owner shows off the diamond in a dim, candlelit room. The flames flicker, emitting a faint amount of ultraviolet light. For a brief, startling moment, the deep blue gem seems to ignite with an eerie red glow from within. In an age before science could explain phosphorescence, what else could that sinister inner light be but proof of a malevolent spirit, an evil aura confirming the stone was cursed? This tangible scientific property is the likely seed from which the entire legend grew. Once that story of a curse was planted, the human mind did the rest of the work through a powerful psychological filter known as confirmation bias. Once you believe you possess an object of doom, your brain actively seeks out and remembers every piece of evidence that supports that belief, while ignoring or downplaying everything that contradicts it. A sudden financial loss, a family tragedy, a simple accident, all of these are misfortunes that can befall anyone. But for an owner of the Hope Diamond, they were not random events. They were chapters in a predetermined story of doom, each one further proof of the curse's power. This effect was supercharged by the media of the day. The rise of sensationalist journalism in the 19th and early 20th centuries found a perfect story in the Hope Diamond. Newspapers competed for readers with dramatic, often exaggerated tales of the gem's victims. They wove together unconnected tragedies across decades and continents, creating a seamless and terrifying narrative of inevitable misfortune. The diamond's owners, like Evelyn Walsh McLean, became celebrities, and their personal sufferings were transformed into public folklore, each headline cementing the curse's place in the popular imagination. The curse of the Hope Diamond, therefore, is a perfect myth. It was born from a natural phenomenon mistaken for magic, nurtured by our own cognitive biases, and amplified into legend by a media machine hungry for a good story. The diamond's true power was never supernatural. It was its unparalleled ability to become a mirror, reflecting our own deepest fears about fate, fortune, and the stories we tell to make sense of the chaos in our lives. The same psychological forces that amplified the Hope Diamond's legend can transform even the most ordinary objects into vessels of terror. In a quiet pub in the English village of Thirsk, a simple oak chair hangs suspended from the ceiling, forever untouched. This is the Busby stoop chair, and its story begins with a brutal murder in 1702. A local man named Thomas Busby had a violent quarrel with his father-in-law, Daniel Orty. The dispute, likely over a counterfeiting operation, ended when Busby brutally murdered Orty. After his arrest and conviction, the legend says that Thomas Busby was taken to the inn for one final meal. As he rose from the chair he had been sitting in, he placed a curse upon it. He swore that anyone who dared to sit in that chair would meet a sudden and violent death. Soon after, Busby was hanged, and his curse began its long, dark legacy. The first alleged victims were two Royal Air Force pilots during the Second World War. They visited the pub, now named the Busby Stoop, and despite being warned about the legend, they laughed and sat in the cursed chair. Within days, both men were killed when their aircraft crashed. A delivery driver then made the same mistake, sitting in the chair to have his lunch. Hours later, he was dead, his truck having overturned in a tragic accident. A local house cleaner also reportedly died after a short illness following her time in the chair. The stories piled up, each new tragedy weaving another thread into the fabric of the curse. The pub's owners, faced with this growing reputation and fearful of further deaths, finally took drastic action. They lifted the heavy oak chair and hung it from the ceiling, safely out of reach, where it remains to this day as a stark warning. So does this chair truly possess a malevolent power? The force at work here is not supernatural but deeply human. This is the power of local folklore in its purest form. In a small community, a dramatic event like a murder and a public execution creates a powerful memory, a story told and retold for generations. When subsequent tragedies occur, especially ones involving sudden, violent death, the human mind instinctively looks for a pattern, a reason. The curse provides a pre-made narrative, a way to connect these disparate, awful events into a single, understandable story of cause and effect. A deadly plane crash in wartime is a horrific but sadly common event. A traffic accident is a daily tragedy, but when you link them to a specific cursed object, they are no longer random. They become punishments, the fulfillment of a prophecy. The curse gives a sense of order to the chaos of misfortune, and in doing so, it transforms a piece of common furniture into a permanent monument to our fear of the unknown and our need to find meaning in tragedy. Beneath the coronation chair in Westminster Abbey, a simple block of sandstone rested for 7 centuries. This was the Stone of Scone, the sacred stone upon which Scottish kings were crowned for generations until the year 1296. In a brutal act of conquest, the English king, Edward I, known as Longshanks, invaded Scotland and seized the stone from Scone Abbey. He took it to London as a spoil of war, a tangible symbol of his victory and Scotland's subjugation, embedding it within the very throne upon which English monarchs would be crowned. It was from this act of theft that a powerful prophecy was born. A curse, some called it, declared that wherever this stone lay, the Scots would ultimately reign. For centuries, this seemed like a desperate hope, a whisper of defiance against an overwhelming power. Yet, history unfolded in a way that gave this legend an eerie truth. Every single English monarch from that point forward, from Edward II to Queen Elizabeth II, was crowned upon a throne that contained the Scottish stone. And by the strange twists of royal lineage and political union, every one of those monarchs also held the title of ruler of Scotland. The prophecy had, in a very literal sense, come true. The Scots had never stopped longing for the stone's return. In 1950, a group of Scottish students staged a daring raid, stealing the stone from Westminster Abbey and bringing it back to Scotland in an act of patriotic fervour. It was recovered by authorities a few months later and returned to London, but the incident reignited the national spirit. Then, in 1996, in a move rich with political symbolism, the British government officially returned the Stone of Scone to Scotland. It now resides in Edinburgh Castle alongside the Scottish crown jewels, where it is intended to remain until the next coronation, when it will be temporarily loaned back to Westminster. But even this triumphant return is shadowed by mystery. For generations, there have been persistent doubts about the stone's authenticity. Some historians and legends suggest that the monks of Scone Abbey, forewarned of Edward's approach, hid the real stone and gave the English king a common block of sandstone. The true stone, they say, remains hidden somewhere in Scotland, its location a closely guarded secret lost to time. This debate itself is a testament to the stone's immense power. It was never just a piece of rock, it was and is the soul of a nation. The so-called curse was not a supernatural spell, but a brilliant piece of psychological warfare. It was a narrative crafted by a subjugated people to reclaim a sense of power. By declaring that the English monarchs only ruled Scotland because they sat upon a Scottish stone, the curse inverted the narrative of conquest. It suggested that English power was dependent on Scottish legitimacy. This story gave hope, a sense of poetic justice that sustained national identity through centuries of political struggle. The Stone of Scone's curse is a perfect example of how a story can become a weapon, and how a symbol can hold more power than any army. Venice, a city of masked balls and shimmering canals, holds a secret curse born not of ancient kings but of a broken heart. The story begins with Giacomo Casanova, history's most famous seducer, whose life was a whirlwind of romantic conquests and daring escapes. Legend whispers of one particular affair that ended not with a fond farewell but with a venomous oath. He is said to have abandoned a lover, a woman of intellect and passion whose name has been lost to time. Enraged and humiliated, she confronted him, placing a curse not only on Casanova himself but upon the entire serene Republic of Venice. She vowed the city would be plagued by misfortune until her own forgotten tomb was discovered and given the honor she was denied in life. Soon after, Venice was indeed struck by a devastating outbreak of plague. The disease swept through the crowded canals, claiming thousands of lives and deepening the shadow over the city's golden age. For believers, this was no coincidence. It was the first fulfillment of her dying promise, a city held hostage by a single woman's scorn. Did this woman truly exist? The historical record is murky. Casanova's own extensive memoirs are famously unreliable, a mix of fact and self-aggrandizing fiction. He wrote of many lovers, but none explicitly match the figure of this vengeful curse-bringer. Historians suggest she may be a composite, a folkloric embodiment of all the women he wronged, their collective pain distilled into one powerful narrative. This tale fits perfectly into the larger story of Casanova, not just as a lover, but as a man perpetually fleeing consequences. His entire life was a dance on the edge of scandal, from his imprisonment in the Doge's palace to his final exile from Venice. The curse gives a mythical weight to the real-life repercussions he constantly faced, transforming his personal failings into a city-wide calamity. It reflects a deep-seated cultural desire for cosmic justice, a belief that such profound personal betrayal could not go unpunished, that the pain of one could ripple out to shake the foundations of an entire empire. The curse of Casanova's lover is a powerful reminder of how folklore works. It takes a universal emotion, the sting of betrayal, and projects it onto the grand canvas of history. A personal vendetta is magnified into pestilence and decline, giving a human face to the impersonal forces of disease and misfortune. We may never find her tomb, but the story itself is her monument, a lasting echo of a promise made in the shadowy corners of a city built on water. A story of vengeance born from a broken heart gives way to a mystery carved from ice and terror. In the freezing February of 1959, a team of 9 experienced Russian hikers set up camp on the slopes of Kholat-Syakh, a name that translates ominously to Mountain of the Dead. They were led by Igor Dyatlov, all of them university students skilled in winter expeditions. Weeks later, a search party found their tent, but it was a scene of pure nightmare. The tent had been cut open from the inside, as if the occupants had torn their way out in a frantic, desperate rush. The hikers were discovered scattered in the snow, some in only their underwear, miles from any shelter. Their bodies told a fractured, horrifying story. One had a fractured skull, another had major chest trauma, and a young woman was missing her tongue. There were no signs of a struggle, no other footprints in the snow, and not a single clear explanation. The official Soviet investigation closed the case, attributing the deaths to a compelling natural force, a phrase that explained nothing and everything at once. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident has remained one of the world's most chilling unsolved mysteries, a puzzle that invites theories from secret weapons testing to predatory Yeti. But one of the most haunting explanations reaches back into the deep past to a curse on the ancient ivory of the mammoth. The theory suggests that one of the hikers was carrying an artifact, a talisman or piece of jewelry crafted from mammoth ivory. For the indigenous Mansi people of the Ural Mountains, mammoths are not just extinct creatures. They are powerful spirits of the underworld, beings whose remains are sacred and deeply taboo to disturb. To take a piece of a mammoth from the earth, especially for personal gain, is to invite the wrath of these subterranean guardians. A curse placed upon such ivory could bring madness, paranoia, and a relentless, unseen force. Could this explain the hikers' irrational behavior? Did a spiritual terror born from a violated taboo drive them from the perceived safety of their tent into the lethal cold, perhaps even turning them violently against one another in a shared psychosis? This supernatural theory attempts to impose a narrative of cosmic justice onto an event that defies all rational deduction. It provides a reason where science and logic have failed, transforming a random, senseless tragedy into a story with a cause and an effect. The human mind recoils from chaos. We are compelled to find patterns, to weave scattered clues into a coherent tale, even if that tale is one of ancient spirits and vengeful curses. The Dyatlov Pass mystery endures not just because of its bizarre facts, but because it represents our deepest fear, the fear of the unknown, and our profound need to believe that even in the most inexplicable horror, there is a meaning waiting to be found. While the silence of Dyatlov Pass remains a chilling enigma, another tomb in the heart of Central Asia spoke its warning aloud for all to hear. In the ancient city of Samarkand, beneath the majestic, ribbed dome of the Gur-e-Amir mausoleum, lay the body of the fearsome conqueror Timur, known to the West as Tamerlane. His legacy was one of immense empires built on unimaginable brutality, and his tomb was marked with a prophecy carved in stone. The inscription was terrifyingly clear. It read, "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble." For centuries, this was seen as a final boast from a man who had made the earth shake in life. But in June of 1941, a Soviet archaeologist named Mikhail Gerasimov decided to test that warning. Ignoring the desperate pleas of local elders who swore the tomb was cursed, Gerasimov and his team broke the seals and opened the conqueror's sarcophagus. Inside, they confirmed the remains were indeed Timur's, and they found a second, even more specific inscription. This one warned that whoever disturbed Timur's rest would unleash an invader more terrible than himself, a punisher of nations. The timing of this act of archaeological hubris was almost beyond belief. Gerasimov opened the tomb on June 20, 1941. Just 3 days later, on June 22nd, Nazi Germany launched its massive, surprise invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. This was not a minor border skirmish. It was the beginning of the single bloodiest military conflict in all of human history, a war that would claim tens of millions of lives. The coincidence was so stark, so devastatingly perfect that it could not be ignored. The legend of the curse exploded through the Soviet ranks. Here was the world trembling, just as the inscription had promised. The invader, Adolf Hitler, perfectly fit the description of the punisher of nations. The story became a potent symbol for soldiers and civilians alike, a folk explanation for a catastrophe that seemed to defy comprehension. The pressure on the Soviet authorities grew immense. In a stunning reversal, they officially sanctioned a full Islamic reburial for the ancient conqueror. In December of 1942, at the turning point of the Battle of Stalingrad, Timur's remains were reinterred with full religious honors and traditional rites, placed back into his tomb with respect and ceremony. Almost immediately, the tide of the war began to turn decisively in the Soviet Union's favor. For believers, the sequence was clear. The curse had been invoked by the opening of the tomb, and it was lifted only when Timur was returned to his eternal peace. This story exists in that strange space where history and superstition collide on a global scale. Skeptics, of course, point to the immense political and military machinations already in motion. Hitler's invasion plan had been in development for a year. Its launch was a matter of strategy, not sorcery, yet the power of the story lies in its timing. The human mind cannot help but connect such monumental events, weaving a narrative of cause and effect that gives a terrifying, almost literary order to the chaos of history. The curse of Timur's tomb is a reminder that sometimes the most powerful warnings are not whispered in the dark, but carved in stone for all to see, waiting for the one moment in history when their meaning becomes terrifyingly real. A different kind of menace emerged not from a tomb or a throne, but from the walls of ordinary British homes. It was the 1980s, and a mass-produced painting of a tearful young boy, his face smudged with dirt and his eyes welling up, was about to become the center of a national panic. The artist, an Italian named Giovanni Bragolin, had created a series of these sentimental portraits, but one in particular, simply titled The Crying Boy, would become infamous. The curse began with a rumor from a firefighter who claimed he kept seeing a bizarre pattern. At the scenes of devastating house fires, he would often find the same item completely untouched by the flames, a cheap print of the Crying Boy painting, hanging perfectly intact on a scorched wall amidst the ashes. The story spread like wildfire itself. The British tabloid newspaper, The Sun, seized upon it, launching a full-scale investigation. They published story after story from terrified readers who claimed the painting was a magnet for disaster. One family reported their home was struck by lightning only after acquiring the picture. Another described a series of small, unexplained fires that ceased the moment they threw the painting out. The narrative was irresistible, a modern curse for the common man. The public reaction was swift and overwhelming. Fearful owners wanted the cursed art out of their houses immediately. The Sun organized a massive public burning, encouraging readers to mail their paintings to the newspaper to be ritually destroyed. Thousands of people did exactly that, creating a mountain of kitsch destined for the flames in a bizarre exorcism of modern anxiety. So how does a factory-made painting become an object of supernatural terror? This was a textbook case of modern folklore in action. The initial firefighter's observation, while strange, was likely a coincidence amplified by selective memory. Once the story was public, people who owned the painting became hyper-aware of any minor household mishap, a flickering candle or a spark from a socket, and connected it directly to the art on their wall. This is confirmation bias working on a mass scale. The media frenzy, particularly from a tabloid culture hungry for sensational stories, provided the fuel. They collected these unverified anecdotes and presented them as evidence, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of fear. The Crying Boy Curse proves that the machinery of legend does not require ancient scribes or royal bloodlines. It can be powered by newsprint and collective suggestion. In an industrial age, a curse can be manufactured, distributed, and believed by millions, all within a few short months. It reveals our enduring need to personify misfortune, to blame a tearful boy in a frame for the random, frightening chaos of everyday life. Sometimes the most chilling curses are not ancient at all, but born from a modern hunger for headlines. In the American town of Pawtucket, Rhode Island, a local museum housed a peculiar resident, the mummy of a 19th-century daredevil named John G. He was a traveling performer whose final, fatal stunt was to be buried alive in a sealed coffin from which he never emerged. His preserved body became a macabre museum attraction for decades, a silent monument to a desperate man's gamble. Then, in 1976, a local radio station saw an opportunity. WBRU, looking for a sensational publicity stunt, offered a cash prize to any listener brave enough to spend a single night alone in the museum with the daredevil's mummy. A young man took the dare, and the station broadcast his overnight vigil, turning a historical oddity into a campfire tale for the entire city. Nothing supernatural happened that night, but the station had unknowingly set the stage for its own curse. The strange misfortunes began soon after. Just 2 years later, a devastating plane crash killed several staff members of WBRU. It was a profound and unrelated tragedy, a real-life horror that shook the community. Yet, in the search for meaning amidst the grief, a story began to form. People started to whisper that the plane crash was not a random accident, but a direct result of the station's disrespect toward the dead daredevil. The curse narrative gained power, fed by the station's own subsequent struggles. WBRU faced a series of financial troubles and internal shakeups, a slow decline that believers saw as the curse continuing to exact its toll. Unrelated, unfortunate events were now being woven together into a single, terrifying tapestry of cause and effect, all linked back to that one night with a mummy. The story of the curse is a masterclass in retroactive storytelling. The initial stunt was harmless if tasteless, and no one spoke of a curse at the time. It was only after the real, unrelated tragedies struck that the human mind went to work, looking backward to find a reason. The publicity stunt became the original sin, the moment the station had invited doom. This psychological process gave a chaotic and painful sequence of events a clear narrative, a villain in the form of a vengeful spirit. It provided a strange kind of comfort, replacing the terrifying randomness of a plane crash with a story that had a clear beginning and a moral lesson. The curse gave meaning to the meaningless. This modern myth eventually found its own peaceful resolution. As the stories of the curse persisted, a growing sense of respect for the dead daredevil emerged. After years as a museum spectacle, the mummy of John G. was finally given a dignified, proper burial. The cycle of disrespect was broken, and with it, the power of the curse seemed to fade. The tale of the Pawtucket daredevil shows us that a curse does not need ancient spells or royal blood to feel real. It only requires a potent mix of human tragedy, the power of suggestion, and our timeless need to connect the dots to tell a story that makes sense of the senseless pain life sometimes brings. Beneath the modern steel and concrete of New York City, a deeper truth was waiting to be unearthed. In 1991, construction began on a new federal building in Lower Manhattan. The ground was broken, and almost immediately workers began to find things, human remains. The digging had accidentally uncovered a lost chapter of American history, the African burial ground. This was a sacred space used by both enslaved and free Africans during the 17th and 18th centuries. A 6-acre plot containing the remains of an estimated 15,000 souls. For these individuals denied dignity in life, this ground was their final sanctuary. The disturbance of this hallowed space seemed to awaken a powerful resistance. The construction site was soon plagued by a relentless series of problems. Machinery broke down repeatedly for no clear mechanical reason. Unexplained delays stalled the project, costing time and money. Workers reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread on the site, and some spoke of hearing strange, sorrowful sounds when no one else was around. To many within the descendant community, these were not random misfortunes. They were signs, the anger of the ancestors whose eternal peace had been so carelessly violated. This was not a curse of malevolent magic, but one of spiritual defiance, a demand for recognition from those history had tried to erase. The response was swift and powerful. Community activists, historians, and outraged citizens rallied together, demanding that the project be halted and the site treated with the respect it deserved. They argued that the so-called curse was a spiritual imperative, a force insisting that these forgotten lives be remembered. Their voices rose above the noise of construction, and they were heard. The federal government stopped the project. The remains that had been unearthed were carefully, reverently studied by a team of African-American archaeologists and then reinterred in a ceremony of profound respect. The site itself was preserved and designated as the African Burial Ground National Monument, a permanent memorial and a place of education. What began as a construction nightmare became a profound moment of national healing. The curse, born from injustice, ultimately forced a long overdue acknowledgement. It compelled a city and a country to confront a painful past, to honor the thousands who built the foundations of New York with their labor and their lives. This story redefines what a curse can be. It is not always a supernatural punishment, but sometimes a spiritual correction, a powerful echo from the past that insists we listen, remember, and finally do what is right. A different kind of cursed gem rests in a London museum, its purple hue shadowed by a tale of colonial guilt and scientific dread. This is the Delhi purple sapphire, a stone whose story is almost as dark as the Hope diamonds, yet it began with a fundamental misidentification. It is not a sapphire at all, but a large and beautiful amethyst. Its legend starts with violence. The gem was allegedly looted by a Bengal cavalryman from the temple of Indra in Kanpur during the bloody Indian Rebellion of 1857. This was not a simple theft, but a sacrilege, a violation of a sacred space that would forever taint the stone's history. The sapphire eventually came into the possession of Edward Heron Allen, a man of immense intellect and diverse talents. He was a respected scientist, a linguist, and a violinist, a figure of the Enlightenment who believed in reason and evidence. Yet this one object would challenge his entire worldview. After acquiring the stone, Heron Allen was struck by a relentless wave of personal and professional disasters. His health faltered, his closest relationships crumbled, and a series of financial and legal troubles seemed to dog his every step. As a rational man, he initially dismissed the connection, but the pattern of misfortune became too stark to ignore. He began to believe the amethyst was a vessel of malevolent energy, a curse born from its violent origin. He even claimed that every person to whom he had ever loaned the gem had suffered some form of terrible luck. His fear of the object grew so profound that he took drastic, symbolic action. He sealed the purple sapphire inside a series of 7 nested boxes, like a prisoner condemned to solitary confinement. He wrapped it with protective charms and wrote a dire warning, instructing that whoever opened the boxes would be cursed and that the stone should be thrown into the sea. For 30 years, the box remained sealed, a secret burden in his home. Upon his death, his daughter, respecting his terrified wishes but unwilling to destroy a potentially valuable artifact, donated the entire sealed package to the Natural History Museum in London. The curse, however, seemed to have one last gasp. The courier tasked with delivering the box to the museum was caught in a freak hailstorm so violent it nearly caused a serious accident. Today, the Delhi purple sapphire sits on display, its purple glow a quiet testament to a powerful psychological phenomenon. The curse was likely a perfect storm of colonial guilt and personal tragedy. Heron Allen, a man of his time, may have been subconsciously tormented by the knowledge that his beautiful object was a product of imperial plunder. When his life unraveled, his brilliant, pattern-seeking mind connected the dots, creating a narrative where the stone was the cause. It became a physical focus for his anxieties, a scapegoat for the random misfortunes that can befall any life. The jinx of the Delhi purple sapphire endures not as a supernatural force, but as a haunting story of how a rational man, confronted with chaos, created a curse to make sense of his own suffering. Some curses feel timeless, echoing a pattern the human mind is desperate to find. The modern legend of the 27 Club binds together the tragic, early deaths of iconic musicians like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain. Their lives were extinguished at the very peak of their fame, all at the same young age, creating a narrative of a cursed generation. But this idea of a fated age is not a modern invention. Ancient cultures were also deeply preoccupied with the mystical significance of numbers, and the number 27 held a particular power. In the mathematics of antiquity, especially within traditions like the Vedic sciences and early Greek philosophy, 27 is 3 cubed. 3 was a number of perfection, of harmony, representing the divine trinity found in so many belief systems, from the heavens, the earth, and the underworld to the mind, body, and spirit. To cube it, to multiply it by itself twice over, was to amplify its power to an almost unstable, explosive degree. It symbolized a transition, a point of culmination where potential reached its absolute limit before a dramatic transformation. This was not necessarily a negative omen, but it was a dangerous threshold. Can we find this pattern in the ancient world? While records are sparse, some historical figures do fit this eerie mold. Alexander the Great's beloved companion, Hephaestion, died suddenly at what some accounts suggest was the age of 27, just a year before Alexander's own death. His passing was so devastating to the conqueror that it is often cited as the blow that broke Alexander's spirit. In Rome, the brilliant but controversial Emperor Gaius, better known as Caligula, was assassinated at the age of 28 after a short and turbulent reign, bringing him perilously close to that 27-year mark. The stories that swirled around their deaths were not about a formal curse, but they were filled with omens and portents, signs that their fates were somehow sealed by the stars or the displeasure of the gods. The human need to find meaning in the deaths of the young and brilliant is a universal constant. When a vibrant life is cut short, especially at the height of its power, we instinctively reject the notion of random chance. We search for a reason, a pattern, a number that makes the unbearable seem part of a larger, if tragic, design. The 27 Club, whether in a Hollywood recording studio or in the courts of ancient empires, is ultimately a story we tell ourselves. It is a way to process the profound loss of potential, to believe that such luminous lives were not simply extinguished by accident, but were part of a mysterious and fated cycle, a number written in the stars long before the first note was ever played. A sword can be more than a weapon, it can be a soul. In the forge of the master swordsmith Muramasa, blades were born with a terrifying reputation. Muramasa was a genius of the steel, a contemporary of the legendary Masamune, but where Masamune's swords were said to be spiritually balanced, bringing peace to their wielders, Muramasa's creations were believed to be possessed by a bloodthirsty and restless spirit. Legends say his own violent and unstable mind was hammered into the metal, creating blades that yearned for conflict. They were not just tools of war, they were catalysts for it. A samurai carrying a Muramasa blade might find his own temper shortened, his judgment clouded by a thirst for violence that seemed to emanate from the sword itself. The most famous tale involves the great shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu, the man who unified Japan. His grandfather was killed by a blade crafted by Muramasa. His father was slashed by another, and his own wife and adoptive son were later executed under suspicion of treason, a tragedy also linked to the infamous swords. For the Tokugawa shogunate, Muramasa blades became objects of pure superstition and fear. They were hunted down, confiscated, and destroyed, their very ownership seen as a sign of disloyalty or a death sentence waiting to happen. But was this a true supernatural curse or something far more political? The answer lies in the nature of power. The Tokugawa regime, having endured so much personal tragedy connected to these swords, had a powerful incentive to brand them as cursed. By declaring Muramasa blades inherently evil, they could easily discredit any rival samurai family that owned one, accusing them of harboring violent intentions against the state. The curse became a brilliant political tool, a pretense for neutralizing enemies and consolidating control. This strategy was so effective because it tapped into a deep-seated Japanese spiritual belief known as kami, the idea that a spirit or essence can reside in any object, especially one crafted with such intense skill and focus. A master swordsmith was not just shaping metal, he was pouring his entire being into the blade. If that spirit was one of rage and imbalance, as Muramasa's was said to be, then the weapon itself could become a vessel for that chaos. The curse of the Muramasa blades is a powerful fusion of superstition and statecraft, where a story of supernatural evil was wielded with the precision of the very swords it condemned. While the Muramasa blades were condemned for the spirit within their steel, a different kind of curse was said to have sailed across the ocean aboard a doomed passenger liner. The story of the SS Bremen is a ghost story wrapped in a maritime mystery, lost to the legends of the Bermuda Triangle. In the late 1930s, this German ocean liner was a symbol of speed and luxury, but its final voyage was shadowed by a peculiar piece of cargo. The ship was reportedly transporting an ancient Egyptian mummy case, a relic rumored to be haunted. Whispers among the crew suggested this was no ordinary artifact. They spoke of hearing faint, scratching sounds from within the sealed crate when no one was near. Some reported seeing fleeting shadows move along the corridors late at night, shadows that vanished when they turned to look. A general, unshakable sense of dread began to permeate the vessel, a feeling that they were carrying a malevolent passenger alongside their paying ones. Then the SS Bremen simply vanished, sailing from New York to Bremerhaven in either late 1939 or early 1940, depending on the account. The ship and all souls aboard disappeared without sending a single distress signal. No wreckage was ever conclusively found. In the void of facts, the legend flourished. The story claimed the cursed mummy case had finally claimed its prize, dragging the entire ship into the depths. The terrifying truth, however, is that the mummy case was almost certainly a fake. It was a well-known forgery, a theatrical prop without a real mummy, created to capitalize on the public's Egyptomania. So how does a counterfeit coffin inspire such a powerful curse narrative? The answer lies in a perfect storm of fear. The ship's disappearance occurred right as World War II was erupting, a time of immense global anxiety. It also happened within the infamous Bermuda Triangle, a region already saturated with supernatural speculation. The crew's ghost stories, likely born from boredom and the power of suggestion aboard a long voyage, provided the final ingredient. When the ship vanished, these pre-existing fears merged into a single, compelling explanation. The fabricated curse gave a terrifying meaning to a tragic and likely quite ordinary maritime disaster. It transformed a simple case of bad weather or perhaps a wartime incident into a supernatural saga, proving that sometimes the most powerful curses are the ones we are already primed to believe. A single scene in a best-selling novel can be more powerful than any ancient spell. Sir Walter Scott's 1829 book, Anne of Geierstein, featured a princess who owned a dazzling, enchanted opal. It was said the stone's fire reflected her moods and even possessed magical properties, but its fate was sealed when a few drops of holy water accidentally splashed upon it. In the story, the opal instantly lost its color, turning dull and lifeless, and the princess herself died shortly after. This was pure fiction, a dramatic plot device, but its impact on the real world was immediate and devastating. Readers across Europe conflated the novel's events with reality, and the opal, once a treasured gem symbolizing hope and purity, became an object of superstition and fear. The European opal market collapsed almost overnight, with prices plummeting and jewelers struggling to sell a stone now seen as a harbinger of death. The curse of the unlucky opal was not born in a tomb but in a library. This newfound reputation began to attach itself to real-world tragedies. The most famous example is the court of Spanish King Alfonso XII. The story goes that he gifted an opal ring to his wife, Mercedes, who died just months after their marriage. He then gave the same ring to his grandmother, who also passed away shortly after. The ring was next given to his sister, who too died an untimely death. Finally, the king himself wore the ring and succumbed to illness in 1885. A string of royal deaths, all linked by a single piece of jewelry, seemed to confirm the opal's deadly curse for an entire generation. Yet the truth behind these events is far less supernatural. The opal is an incredibly fragile stone composed of up to 20% water. If it is allowed to dry out or if it suffers a sudden temperature change, it can easily crack or lose its internal fire, a process called crazing. What looked like a gem dying, as in the novel, was simply a delicate stone reacting to its environment. In the case of the Spanish court, the tragedies were almost certainly coincidental, the result of disease or political turmoil in an era before modern medicine. The power of Scott's story, however, created a lens through which any misfortune involving an opal was magnified and remembered, while all the good fortune associated with the stone was forgotten. This is the anatomy of a literary curse. It requires no magic, only a compelling narrative and the human tendency to find patterns. A writer's imagination, translated into print, can rewrite history and reshape economies, proving that a story can be the most potent curse of all. That steady drip of water in Knaresborough did more than just carve the rock, it built upon it. If you could speed up time, you would witness a simple teddy bear slowly vanishing beneath a smooth, grey coating, its soft fabric form hardening into a permanent statue. This is not witchcraft at work, but the patient, invisible labor of chemistry. The water feeding the petrifying well begins its journey as rain, seeping down through a thick layer of limestone bedrock. As it travels, the water, which is naturally slightly acidic, dissolves the limestone, absorbing vast quantities of minerals, primarily calcite. When this mineral-rich water emerges at the well and drips over an object, a simple but magical seeming transformation occurs. Exposed to the air, the water releases carbon dioxide gas. This chemical shift forces the dissolved calcite to solidify, depositing a microscopic layer of stone with every single drop. Over months or years, this relentless, dripping accumulation completely encases the object in a solid shell of travertine, a form of limestone. It is the exact same process that creates the majestic stalactites hanging in caves, just happening here on a human scale and timeline. For a medieval world with no knowledge of dissolved minerals or hydrogeology, what else could this be but a curse or a miracle? A piece of cloth, something you knew to be soft and pliable, could be left for a season and returned to you as rigid as rock. This was not a natural process, it was a direct defiance of nature itself, an alchemy that could only be explained by a supernatural force. The legend of Mother Shipton provided the perfect, terrifying answer. Her alleged curse gave a name and an intention to this bewildering phenomenon, transforming a geological marvel into a monument of fear and prophecy. The well was her proof, a place where her power was visibly, tangibly manifested for all to see. This fusion of natural mystery and human storytelling created a curse that endured for centuries, a powerful reminder that the world is full of wonders that become legends only when we lack the words to explain them. But a curse does not truly become immortal until it is given a new life on the silver screen. The sensational headlines of the 1920s found their ultimate expression in Hollywood. Universal Pictures released The Mummy in 1932, starring Boris Karloff as the ancient priest Imhotep. This film did not simply retell the story of Tutankhamun, it transformed it. Karloff's mummy was not a reanimated corpse, but a powerful, intelligent sorcerer, a being of tragic romance and terrifying will. He moved with a slow, deliberate menace, his eyes burning with a timeless desire. The film borrowed the real-world anxiety surrounding Tutankhamun's tomb and repackaged it as Gothic horror, replacing the vague threat of illness with a tangible, walking monster. This single movie codified the image that would dominate for decades, the bandaged creature shambling through the dark, driven by a singular need for vengeance. The curse was no longer about toxic mold or bad luck. It was about a personal, supernatural punishment brought to your doorstep. Decades later, the cycle repeated itself with a new kind of energy. The blockbuster films starring Brendan Fraser, beginning in 1999, took the established Hollywood myth and injected it with action and adventure. These movies presented the curse as a thrilling spectacle, complete with swarms of scarabs, shape-shifting priests, and elaborate trap-filled tombs. They were not meant to be historical documents, but they were incredibly effective at repopularizing the legend for a new generation. The fictional image of the mummy became so pervasive that it began to feed back into the public's understanding of real archaeology. People who had never read a newspaper report from 1922 nevertheless felt a familiar chill when hearing about an Egyptian tomb. The Hollywood monster had, in a sense, colonized the historical event. This created a powerful feedback loop where fiction and reality became permanently intertwined. A real discovery sparked sensational news, which inspired a fictional film, which then shaped how future generations interpreted all similar real discoveries. The curse of the Pharaohs endures not because of any supernatural force, but because we have never stopped telling the story, each time adding new layers of bandages, new special effects, and new reasons to fear what might be waiting in the dark. That roar of destiny was said to be heard across the hills when the true king stood upon it. The stone of Scone is far more than a block of sandstone. It is the legendary Lia Fail, the stone of destiny. In the mists of Irish and Scottish mythology, this was the sacred coronation stone, a physical test of sovereignty that would cry out in confirmation when the rightful High King placed his feet upon it. This profound symbolism transformed the stone into the very soul of a nation, the ultimate arbiter of legitimate rule. When King Edward I of England stole it in 1296, he was not just taking a trophy, he was attempting to steal Scotland's right to rule itself, embedding their heart directly beneath the English throne. The curse that followed, the prophecy that Scots would reign wherever the stone lay, was a masterstroke of political defiance. It was not a spell cast by a witch or a wizard, but a narrative weapon forged in the fires of oppression. This story ingeniously flipped the script of conquest. It declared that every English monarch crowned upon the stone was in fact deriving their authority from a Scottish source. The curse was a powerful act of psychological reclamation, a way for a subjugated people to assert that their identity and their right to sovereignty could not be so easily erased. The passion for its return burned for centuries, culminating in a daring act on Christmas Day, 1950. A group of 4 Scottish students broke into Westminster Abbey and pried the stone of Scone from the coronation chair. In their fervor to liberate this national symbol, the stone sustained a crack, splitting it into 2 pieces. As they smuggled it north, this damage was seen by some as a new chapter in the stone's long story. Had the curse been reinvigorated by the violent act of its retrieval? Was the stone itself wounded by the struggle, its power altered? The students, viewing themselves as patriots, had the fragments repaired by a skilled stonemason in Scotland, and for 4 months the stone was hidden, a secret victory for Scottish nationalism. Its eventual return to London was a political necessity, but the message had been sent. The crack served as a permanent reminder that the stone's story was one of conflict and resilience, not passive acceptance. The so-called curse of the Stone of Scone was never about supernatural vengeance. It was about the unbreakable link between a people and their symbols. It was a story crafted to sustain a national spirit, a promise whispered through generations that rightful sovereignty cannot be held captive by force, and that the true roar of a nation can never be fully silenced. The whispering of ancient mammoth spirits gives way to the cold, hard language of physics and forensics. For decades, investigators have tried to force the Dyatlov Pass tragedy into a rational framework, and the most persistent theory involves a slab avalanche. Proponents suggest a heavy layer of snow fractured above the tent, sliding down and striking the hikers as they slept. The impact could explain the severe internal injuries like chest trauma and a fractured skull without leaving external marks. The panicked survivors, some barely clothed, might have then cut their way out from under the snow and stumbled into the darkness. This theory, however, is riddled with troubling inconsistencies. The slope where they camped was not considered steep enough for a major avalanche. The tent itself was found still standing, largely intact and mostly buried by snow that fell after the event, not displaced by a powerful slide. Crucially, no evidence of a recent avalanche, like fracture lines or debris piles, was documented by the original search party. Another scientific explanation points to an invisible and inaudible threat: infrasound. These are low-frequency sound waves below the range of human hearing that can be generated by powerful winds whipping across mountain ridges. In certain conditions, infrasound can induce feelings of intense anxiety, dread, and even full-blown panic in humans. Could a sudden, severe katabatic wind have descended upon the pass, generating these disorienting waves? The hikers, seized by an irrational, primal terror, might have slashed their way out of the tent and fled in a confused state, later succumbing to the brutal cold. This theory elegantly explains their seemingly senseless flight, but it does not adequately account for the specific, violent injuries 2 of them sustained. A darker possibility involves a secret military test. The Urals were a hub for Soviet weapons development, and the hikers may have inadvertently camped near a testing range. An accidental explosion, perhaps of a new missile or a parachute mine, could have created a concussive blast that caused the internal injuries and forced them to flee. This might also explain the heightened radiation levels reportedly found on some of their clothing and the bizarre orange tint of their skin. The official rush to close the case and classify files only fuels these suspicions. Yet, no wreckage or bomb fragments were ever found at the scene, and such a test would have required a massive cover-up with no witnesses ever coming forward. A more terrestrial theory suggests a violent confrontation. The indigenous Mansi people used the area for hunting and reindeer herding. Did the hikers accidentally trespass on a sacred site or have a fatal clash with local hunters? This could explain the physical trauma, but it fails to align with the evidence. The official investigation found no other footprints, no signs of a struggle in or around the tent, and the Mansi themselves actively assisted the search parties. Each theory, from avalanche to infrasound to military accident, illuminates a piece of the puzzle, yet none fits perfectly. They are all plausible, yet incomplete, leaving crucial questions unanswered. The enduring power of the Dyatlov Pass mystery lies in this very tension. It is a stark reminder that our drive for a logical answer can sometimes run aground on the rocks of an event so bizarre that it defies every explanation we try to build, leaving us suspended between the world of reason and the chilling possibility that some doors are never meant to be opened. We have walked through deserts and palaces, from the tombs of pharaohs to the thrones of kings. These 25 tales of legendary curses, each unique in its origin, share a common thread. They are not woven from magic, but from the very fabric of our own humanity. We see history refracted through the lens of tragedy, coincidence amplified by fear, and political power wielded through the language of superstition. A toxic mold in a sealed tomb becomes the pharaoh's vengeance. A gem's scientific phosphorescence ignites a 200-year story of doom. A stolen stone fuels a nation's defiant hope for 7 centuries. These curses reveal our profound and timeless need to impose a narrative on the chaos of existence. We are pattern seekers by nature, and when faced with the unexplainable, from a hiker's mysterious death to a president's assassination, we instinctively reach for a story. These legends provide a framework, a sense of cause and effect in a world that is often random and cruel. They transform impersonal historical forces into personal dramas of justice and revenge. So, are these curses real? The answer may lie not in the supernatural, but in the undeniable power they hold over us. A story believed by millions, repeated for generations, and embedded in our culture becomes a force in its own right. It shapes our perceptions, influences our decisions, and even alters the course of history. The next time you hear a whisper of an ancient curse, ask yourself what deeper truth it might be hiding. What fear is it giving voice to? What injustice is it seeking to correct? The true magic was never in the spell itself, but in our enduring need to believe that the world has a moral order, and that every action, even beyond the grave, has its consequence. We want to know which of these stories captured your imagination. Was it the silent threat within an emperor's tomb, the glittering dread of a blue diamond, or the political prophecy of a stolen stone? Share your favorite legendary curse in the comments below. Subscribe for more journeys into the heart of history's greatest mysteries, and remember, sometimes the most powerful enchantment is the tale we choose to tell.